Hi guys, welcome back to the Forgetful Scholar, and this week, one book. But I loved it, and it's one book because I found myself savoring it. I went slow, I took my time with it. I was gonna say the analogy of drinking a fine wine, you take your time, but I don't do that when I drink wine, glug glug glug. Anyway. So it's a 5-star. I had so much fun this week. So it's enemies to lovers, male, female, straight historical romance. Lady Sophia's Lover, Bow Street Runners, Book 2, Lisa Kleypas. That's right, I found it. I've been looking for it for so long, and I finally found it. Now, the first of the Bow Street Runners, I didn't particularly like, right? The third book, I really enjoyed. And I was hoping that the second book I would really like too. Because Sir Ross, who is the hero in this book, is basically runs the Bow Street Runners. Which are like Scotland Yard before Scotland Yard, right? The detectives, you know what I mean? Because they have constables, but they're detectives kind of a thing, right? And I enjoyed him in the first book. In the first book, he seems to be the only guy... Well, no. One of the voice of reasons. Everybody was like, hey... Because the hero in the first book, Grant, they were like, hey, Grant, I don't think she is who you think she is. But, he was the most calm about it and showing evidence that Grant just refused. And in the third book, I really like Sir Grant and his wife... Lady Sophia, spoiler alert, they get married. And I really like Nick Gentry, which is the third book, who he's about, right? And the thing is, this one and the third book are examples of when Lisa Kleypas gives the same amount of attention to her male leads as she does to her female leads. You know what I mean? Because the first of this series, I don't think Grant got enough attention as Victoria did, right? So it just felt a little one-sided, and I wasn't interested in him, which is ridiculous because I love Grumpy with a Heart of Gold, right? And you see this in the Wallflowers. I don't particularly like because I feel like the male leads don't get enough attention as the female leads. Because Lisa Kleypas' women, I always enjoy them. They're always fascinating. Even if I enjoy hating them, most of the time I like them, right? Because she gives a lot of attention to them and they feel really rounded and grounded, and they kind of, have a whole rich history to them, right? In the Wallflowers, I didn't like any of the men because I felt like they were just cut and paste, typical archetypes, nothing in depth to them, right? Which is a shame because one, I love Grumpy with a heart but a softie inside, and a Rascal with a Heart of Gold. And those two archetypes were in Wallflowers, but I still did not jive with it, right? But in the Hathaway series of Lisa Kleypas's, the two older sisters and the brothers books, oh, so good. Because the male leads really were really rich as the female leads. You know what I mean? I think the younger two sisters, the male leads weren't that compelling. You know what I mean? They had more attention than the Wallflowers, but still not as much as the other three, right? So they were fine. But that's why one of the Hathaway series is one of my favorite by Lisa Kleypas, is because the first 3 books, well, I shouldn't say first because I forget when the brothers book comes into that category, but were so good, because I felt both leads got the same amount of attention, right? And this, I felt like we got the same amount of attention. Ross got the same amount of attention as Sophia. And let me tell you, I love them both. And this isn't confirmation bias because I know I said, I already like Sir Ross from the other books. And I already liked Lady Sophia from the other books. But that's happened to me before, and then I got where I've read their story and I was disappointed. So this has happened before, right? So it's no confirmation bias. I was really oh no, I hope I really like this because it's going to kill me if I don't. But it's okay, because I did. So yay. Alright, so there's going to be spoilers in this, and I generally always do spoilers. Like, if it's a newer release, I try not to, or I try to give a warning. But this was released in 2002. So, come on, guys. 21 years. Okay, so Sir Ross is kind of the Superman, King Arthur archetype. Like, he is good. He's not corrupted. He's just an honest to God good guy, right? So he is the head of the Bow Street Runners, and he's called the Monk of Bow Street because a lot of women throw themselves at him, and he's like, nah. And you find out later he doesn't enjoy sex without an emotional component. Which, you know, sweet, right? Sweet. And the thing is, Sir Ross isn't usually a male archetype for romance that I particularly enjoy. So the fact, because I usually like my characters with a little bit of gray mixed in, so the fact that he is a particular archetype I don't really jive with, but I adore him, should tell you something, right? And he's going about his life, you know, he's all about work because he's got nothing else. You do find out that he is a widow. His first wife passed away in childbirth, you know. Grant makes an appearance throughout the book, but doesn't take over, which is good because that's a complaint I have of Lisa Kleypas in the past. She has her favorites, and sometimes when her favorites just come in for like a little pop-in, they tend to take over, but that didn't happen here, so I'm happy about that. Yeah, so he's living his life, right? And then this woman, and he placed an ad for basically administrative assistant, like a secretary, you know. And this woman comes in, QR heroine. So Lady Sophia, she was, okay, so her and her younger brother, John, their parents died when they were really young. I think they say something about John running away to London when he was around 9 and getting thrown in prison when he was around 14-ish. So keep that timeline in mind. Very young, right? And they were running wild, and then their older cousin took Sophia in, but John ran away. And I wonder why John ran away. You know what I mean? Doesn't really, I don't remember if it's in the third book. I might have to go over that just to see. But the cousin basically had Lady Sophia as her servant. So Lady Sophia grew up basically being part of the servant class. She's not angry about it. You know, she's just living her life, right? And then her cousin tells her 5 years later that John died. Like, John was sentenced to a prison hook when he was when he was 14, and he died a year later of cholera. So devastating, right? Completely devastating, right? So she sees an advertisement for Sir Ross, who sentenced her brother to prison, needs of a secretary. So she applies because she's got vengeance in mind. So that's why there's enemies to lovers, even though he doesn't know they're enemies. But Sophia, they're like enemies, right? And I love Lady Sophia because honestly, it's so refreshing to read a romance where the heroine isn't like a perfect Disney princess. Like, this girl got claws, and I love it. Like, she's out for vengeance, you know? And he's basically like, oh no, a woman can't work in Bow Street. So she kind of basically cons him into hiring her. And her plot is to go through the records and find corruption. Because she doesn't believe that he's a good person. Because he has to be corrupt. He's the reason her brother is dead. He has to be corrupt. She hates him. And like, you read how much she just physically hates him. Like, it's so visceral. You feel that. You know what I mean? You do. And you root for her. I rooted for her. I rooted for both of them. It was a really weird time, but I had a fun time. It was a weird but fun time. Because my emotions were all over the place reading it, and I loved it. Anyway. And this book is a great example of when Lisa Kleypas shows, not tells. Because that's another thing when it comes to her male heroes. She's like, oh, he's badass. But we don't see it. But I do see in the Bow Street series 2 and 3, she shows the physical and mental capability of the heroes, and you're like, oh man, he's super cool. He's badass. She dropped the ball with Grant. I'm sorry. He's supposed to be super, like, he's supposed to be like Sherlock Holmes, but the guy he was a fucking idiot. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? No common sense. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people like the first one. I get it. And it's not argument to Grant. He's a fine archetype. It's just Lisa Kleypas needed to give him more time, right? So one scene where she starts to because she already thinks he's corrupt and evil, like that's what she has in mind. And that's kind of how she's justifying ruining his life, right? And she's attracted to him, and she could tell he's attracted to her. So she's like, I'll seduce him too. So when the betrayal comes, it'll make him love me. And when the betrayal comes, it comes from someone he loved. And haha. And I was like, ooh, girl, you're going all the way. You're going to like destroy him. I am here for it. Wait, I like Sir Grant. I don't want you to destroy him, but I am here for this. But we all know I'm bloodthirsty. So anyway, when she, in the interview, she does mention that she's not an innocent in the concept of like, oh, I worked as a servant. This isn't going to surprise you, blah, blah, blah. And personal information got out, and she reveals that in the small town she was working as a servant, a country lord, next to them, seduced her, took her innocent, and she didn't realize he was married. You know what I mean? And she expects Sir Ross to judge her and like think her disgusting, all that stuff. He doesn't. He blames the guy that did that to her, and his name is Anthony, and he blames Anthony. And so she's kind of taken aback because she expected him to do what any male of a title would do in the 1800s. You know what I mean? Put her in like soiled dove category in his mind, but he didn't. He treats her with a lot of respect. So she's kind of like, what? No, you're supposed to be a dick. What's happening? What's happening? And I love the confusion in her mind, because like, fair enough, right? Because she's hated him for like 10 years. She's hated him. Or 16 years, 6 years. For more than 5 years. She's despised this man, right? And she had this like picture of what he was in her head. And he just does things that slowly dismantle it. And she's like, no, I'm supposed to hate him, And this servant, not a servant, but she's like working class. She shows up. She's worried for her sister. It's like a case. And I'm bringing this up because this is another like chip in Sophia's plan, or her idea of the vile, evil Sir Ross, right? And it's also a mark of Lisa Kleypas showing Sir Ross to not give a shit about titles, but he cares about people. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm mentioning it. And she says, oh, my brother-in-law is locked my sister up in the room, and I'm scared. I haven't seen her for a month. Please help. And she's like, oh, he's not going to help because, what happens between a husband and a wife, especially back then, it's no one's business. But he does. He takes one of his bigger, more like brute-esque runners and gives him the assignment. And the runner is like, I don't know, should we be even bothering this? And he's like, what would you do if it was your sister? So not only does he hate violence against women and children, and you see it through his actions, he gets other runners to see past their own perception, right? So another chink in the vile, evil Ross's, image in Sophia's mind, right? And then he brings Nick Gentry, who I love, who's the main character in the third book, in for questioning. There's a riot happening because the people love Nick Gentry, right? So Sophia goes to tell Sir Ross when in the questioning room, and that's when Nick Gentry sees her. Just putting that to the side right there, right? He orders Sophia out because he doesn't want her in that room because it's dangerous, right? The rioters break into the station. And it's a scary scene. And this is the first act. This isn't the first act. And usually Lisa Kleypas is our third act queen. Usually a lot of stuff doesn't happen until the third act. I was shocked that there was action happening in the first act. And I'm like, you go. This is so much fun. Let's go. So there's a huge terrifying mob. And she writes it so like you feel terrified yourself. Like it's a fantastic scene. And they're clawing at her because she's really pretty. You know what I'm saying? It's not good. They're clawing at her. They're ripping her dress. And then we are shown Sir Ross, like, pushing through the crowd, knocking heads, elbowing his way through, like they're just nothing. And he's getting to her. And he gets the people off of her and he shields her with his body, right? And I'm like, oh, what a great scene. So stuff progresses. Sir Ross is shot and Sophia takes care of him. And she realizes that her vengeance is going to hurt her just as much because she realizes she has fallen for him because he is not who she thought she was. So I love the inner turmoil because she loves her brother and she's still mourning her brother and she still is so angry about her brother's death, right? And he's trying to get them basically start a relationship. And it's not like he wants to take her as a lover. He actually has plans to marry her. You know, he doesn't care that she's a servant. Even though she was born, you know, her parents were a viscount. It doesn't matter. To her, she's a servant. To the larger city, like Ton, she's a servant. He doesn't give a shit. He wants to marry her. He loves her, right? And she's in complete turmoil. And when she tells him why she came here for vengeance and why, he seems so racked with guilt and he has to find out what happened, right? And he's like, how can you forgive me? You know, it's beautiful scene, right? And I love that she comes clean with it because I didn't expect that. I kind of expected it to go till Act 3. Like, hold that secret till Act 3. But there's another secret she holds till Act 3. So she starts getting weird, expensive gifts, you know? And Nick Gentry, like, kidnaps her, kind of. Kidnaps her. And there's a beautiful, like, heart-wrenching scene where where he's trying to prove to her that he's Johnny. And, you know, he has the same childhood scar that only Johnny has. It's very specific. So she's so happy, right? And she's already in love with Sir Ross, so it's nice that she's able to let go of hating him for Johnny's death, right? But Johnny/Nick still hates Ross. Like, they're mortal enemies, right? So he kind of blackmails her. Like, it's a weird thing. But I encourage, if you read this, encourage to read book 3 too, because you understand Nick a lot more, why he did that. So she's holding on to that secret, and she's, he kind of blackmailed her to see if there's any evidence, you know, stuff like that. So she's holding on to that secret, right? And Ross asks her to marry her, and she's like, no. And then, like, he kind of convinces her, and they get married. Like, it's very fast. I was like, whoa, this is really fast. And she kind of hates that Nick isn't there because it's her family, but she knows Nick and Ross are mortal enemies, and she feels like torn in the middle because she doesn't want them to fight, right? And then Nick is arrested, and the evidence is actually good enough to, you know, hang him, and she comes clean. And Ross is furious, but he's more furious that she lied to him, you know? And I love that they have good communication. Like, through their married, like, their short little chapter of them being married before the big third act happens, I love that they have good communication. Even though she's holding on to the secret, right? Ross opens up to her, she opens up to him. Like, it's actually like, it feels more of almost like a modern marriage with respect. You know, it's wonderful, you know? It's absolutely wonderful. So he's more upset about her not telling him the truth, her lying to him, her not trusting him, you know, which is it, yeah. And they talk it through, guys. In a romance novel, they actually communicate. It's a novel idea. Wow. Like, I'm fucking ridiculous. I don't even know why you guys watch me. I'm ridiculous. But yeah, they talk about it, and she begs him to save her brother. And she feels guilty because she knows it's too much. It's way too much. He can't do anything. He's going to ruin his career, right? And by the way, when she was trying to find evidence of corruption, she found none. Because Sir Ross really is like a not corrupted cop. I'm going to leave that there. Because I don't want to get into politics. Anyway. So it's nice. You know, he's an actual good guy. You know, so there's a scene that, like, Nick Gentry, like, we switched to Nick Gentry's point of view. There is one scene that didn't have to be in there. Her ex-lover that, like, lied to her and took her innocence. Turns out, like, he's invited to their wedding, and then he tries to blackmail her into being with him again, or, like, he'll ruin her, even though Ross knows. Ross corners him. Fucking threatens it. Like, we see a little bit of, like, the animal inside Ross, right? And, like, how far he'll go to protect Sophia. And it shows, like, how much he loves her, you know? And it's a fun scene. It's a fun scene. Like, being the crap out of this guy. Because you want him to be terrified, you know? I was kind of hoping In my mind, anyway, the guy peed his pants. But it's not on the page. But I just like to pretend he did. I got issues. Anyway. So we get into Nick Gentry's point of view. He does this incredible escape, you know. And then he almost gets away, but Sophia has him at gunpoint. She's like, no, my husband's going to fix this. And he's like, yeah, right, yeah, right. And internally, Nick Gentry is so tired of him being like a criminal underlord, also catching criminals. Like, it's a weird thing, his character. And he's so tired of it. And the only reason he's hesitating on leaving London completely is because of Sophia, like his sister. He has a sister back for so long, you know. And Nick, he's had a really rough go of it. I think we can all, if you read the third book, you know what I'm talking about. I think, but we all know what happens to a 14-year-old boy who's sent to prison with grown adult men. The horrible things that could have happened to him. Anyway. So it's funny because she's like holding a gun on him, and then Ross gets angry at her because she's pregnant and she's holding a gun and she put herself in danger, and he basically like, I'm making you into a runner. You're gonna be a runner or you're gonna get hanged. Choose. And basically turns Nick Gentry into a runner. They still are antagonistic to each other, Nick and Ross, which I find fun. Even in the third book, they kind of are. But like something Sophia said rang true to him. No one ever gave him a chance. You know, gave Nick a chance. And so, yeah. So, and it's a happily ever after. They have a beautiful daughter. And she's like, I know you wanted a son. He's like, I never said that. He's like, all men want son. He's like, no, if you give me a house full of daughters, I'll be the happiest man alive. And I was like, oh, Sir Ross. Oh. So you're making me reevaluate the archetypes, the male hero archetypes I like and don't like, because you're making me really like the perfect moral characters, at least in this one. So I had a blast. I love this book. 5 stars. The Bow Street Runner series on itself, I would say like 4 stars, because I loved the third and second book. The first book, I gave it 2 stars because it just, when I read Lisa Kleypas' books like this, I see what she can do. How she could give them equal tension. How she can weave these scenes so we see the characters' personalities. You know, so that when I read something like the first Bow Street Runner's book, where there's so little care to the male character and so little care to show what he's like, we're just told what he's like. I'm like, come on, man. You are capable of amazingness. What's going on here? So I do enjoy the Bow Street Runner series quite a bit. I think it's going to go up there with the Hathaways and the Revenant series, because I really like those 3. Not the biggest fan of the Wallflower series. Only one of those books I really liked, but there we go. So I had a fun week, and again, I enjoyed just savoring this book. Again, like a fine wine, but again, I just guzzle that shit down, so I'm not the one to say that. Anyway, I don't want too much time for me to get back to the real world. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.